My name is Jaya King.
Thank you. Got it. Thank you. There we are.
Hi, my name is Jaya King.
Hi, everyone virtually.
Thank you guys for having me here. I have something that I have to admit to you guys. This is my first live demo since pre-pandemic. So thank you for your patience with me as I remind myself how to talk to a group of people and share about a medium that personally I've honestly not touched since about pre-pandemic. So this is going to be a good rack of my brain to share this with you guys. So I'll be demonstrating, or not necessarily demonstrating, but I'll be giving you guys a lecture on encaustic art today. And encaustic art is a process using pigmented hot wax. So essentially you're painting with heat and fire to create imagery. I brought a bunch of examples that I would love to pass out, as well as I'll show to our virtual folks. But I'm going to go through the process. I'm going to go through some materials, and I'm also going to show you some of my personal artwork, just so you can kind of see how far you can go with the medium. Because I feel like encaustic, there's a sort of a stinted growth with the medium, due in large to either the lack of knowledge of how to use this total like slip and slide material. There's a stint of growth based on possible safety concerns. And I'll be talking a little bit about that, how you would want to get your encaustic studio set up. And I also feel that there's a stint of growth just because there's not a whole lot of resources for hands-on opportunity to work with this medium. I can't really say unfortunately, because the pandemic was a sort of a double-edged sword for me, where some avenues closed and others opened. I'm no longer teaching encaustic workshops, otherwise I would be tooting my horn all over the place about that. However, I would like to recommend, if you are interested in learning, Linda Nunez, she holds workshops, I believe, in the Elk Grove area. I want to say it's not that far. I drove from Sacramento to you guys. It's not that bad. If you want to learn when there's a will, there's a way. Let me put it that way. So Linda Nunez would be one to look up if you really want to get hands-on. So that being said, let me share a little bit about the background of this process. So encaustic, technically speaking, let me pull up. Oh, hi virtual guys. Oh, you guys are just like you're like in a little box. I got my realsies and I got my people in a box here. Let's go to my presentation. Hello, can we go full screen? View. Right here. Enter PDF. Enter PDF full screen. I figured that out just by myself right there. Encaustic is working with, like I mentioned, pigmented hot wax, and it is essentially beeswax, a hardening agent called Damar resin. You might have heard of Damar varnish. If there are any oil painters in here, you might have heard of Damar varnish. It's made with beeswax, Damar resin, and pigment. It is a natural organic medium. Encaustic paint, and I know that I'm going through my presentation and I'm holding something up real time, so sorry virtual guys. I brought a few examples of encaustic paint. Encaustic paint essentially comes in cakes. They look like little pieces of candy or desserts. They are highly pigmented, and essentially this is a tube of paint. If you've worked with, let's say, acrylic or oil paint, you squeeze out a tube of paint and you work with that, it's oversaturated and just, it's like a loudspeaker of product on your substrate. So encaustic, working with encaustic paint, For instance, water to watercolor, matte medium or medium to acrylic, turp to oil. You use encaustic medium to encaustic. Encaustic medium is essentially beeswax and the hardening agent Damar resin. So what you see up here, this on the left, and I happen to bring one, you'll see encaustic paint that has been essentially diluted or thinned down to a workable consistency. And it is being heated on an encaustic palette. Encaustic requires all sorts of heat to make it pliable. Otherwise, this isn't going to cut it, because this is just essentially to really dumb it down like a candle in a bucket. This isn't going to work out for you. So it needs to be liquefied. Encaustic palette, you'll see right here, this is an anodized aluminum encaustic palette. And underneath this piece of anodized aluminum is a heating coil, something that you would see in a kitchen, like a single burner heating coil. I'm going to show you my Nordstrom version of this encaustic palette in another slide. But the heating coil is heating, it is in contact with that slab of aluminum, and it is melting the wax to a safe melting point. Safety is huge with encaustic, because if you overheat your wax, it essentially is going to break down the integrity of this beautiful product. So you want to keep it at safe working temperatures. I generally work at about 175 to 200 degrees. That's my range. Sometimes my wax gets a little bit over, but you don't want to exceed too far. Otherwise, your wax is going to start to yellow. And if it seriously overheats, you're going to start to smell it first. You're going to say, okay, something's not right. Check your temperatures. Here's another example of the heated palette in action. You can mix your colors. It's absolutely gorgeous stuff. You can mix your colors. You can quote unquote thin them down, create translucent layers with more encaustic medium, just like you would add more water to your watercolor. Does that make sense? Yeah. It's like painting straight from the tube versus being able to adjust that translucency. Encaustic paint is made with the same pigments as any other artist grade paint. The pigment is the same. It is the binder that is different. So encaustic has a wax binder, whereas watercolor would be gum arabic or honey if you're using, MGM. I haven't touched that in a while. I'm doing that later. Or liquid polymer emulsion for acrylic or linseed oil for oil. Encaustic has a beeswax binder. You'll know, oh, well, you're not gonna see. I love how I point to the screen and no one can see what I'm pointing at. I do this in my Zoom demos all the time. Let me see if I can, you guys can see my little mouse, right? See this? And I'm mainly doing this for my Zoom people at home, but you see this little bar across the top of the encaustic palette. That's a nice little brush rest so that your brushes can remain hot while you're working. Encaustic loves natural bristles, and it will let you know if you have a natural synthetic blend brush, because that synthetic brush, once it meets that heat, it's going to curl up on you. And you're like, oh, that's useless now. So natural bristles are the best brushes to use with encaustic. For instance, pocket brushes, sumi brushes, anything that basically comes from an animal, you're good. I mentioned safety with encaustic, and this is a huge part of having a viable studio. So ventilation is absolutely a thing, even though encaustic is made from natural materials. It can create I would say, almost like a heavy fume that likes to hang out right above that paint. And that fume can cause lightheadedness, you can have headaches if it's not ventilated. So that's another sort of a self-test in your encaustic studio. They're like, oh my God, I feel a little bit woozy, or oh, I've got a headache. you're probably having some poor ventilation. And so this sort of like I like to describe it as my Mickey Mouse ventilation system. We use this when I instructed at University Art. What you see, and I'm going to do a little like this guy right here. This is actually a bathroom exhaust fan, and the tubing is expelling those fumes that it's catching. Notice how there's a baffle over that fan. It's not just a box fan, but that baffle is helping to control and grab that airflow. That right there, it's exhausted outside. The cross ventilation, having good air coming in, for instance, like I say this with an asterisk afterwards, like if you have the air conditioning on, because that can start to change the temperature in your studio. So if you want to try encaustics, just know that the first few times you jump in, it is 100% experimentation, figuring out your space. Don't think you're going to actually paint anything. Release that and just say, okay, how can I get my space set up? What's working? What's not? Give yourself that breathing room, literally, to get your space set up for success, and then start playing with the medium. Because if something isn't working on that technical level, it's going to be that much more frustrating moving into that process. Another reason why it's great jumping into a class where you can see how the instructor might have their classroom set up. And that way you can kind of see how you can adjust that in your own home studio. These are, like I'm pointing at it again, right? These are the anodized aluminum pallets that you saw the wax was melted on. However, in this case, we're using the heated pallets for encaustic monoprinting. Encaustic isn't just painting with a brush. There is a sculptural aspect to this medium. There's, it's sort of like the United Nations of combining all mediums together. You can work with collage, you can work with dry media, for instance, pastels, soft and oil pastels. You can work with image transfer, India ink. And in this case, we're using encaustic for monoprinting on sumi paper, or a rice paper, I'm sorry. That was a fun class. Here's one of my students using a mini encaustic palette, and right next to it is a little Presto skillet of bulk encaustic medium. Hint, hint, hint. Having that means that you can just constantly refill and you don't have to keep waiting for the dang stuff to melt. Because, and part of the reason why an active demo is not happening right now is because it takes a certain amount of time to prepare and melt the wax and have everything to temperature and have the ventilation. Active encaustic demos, I like to call it the traveling circus. It's an extreme, it's a little bit extra. So she's using a small version of that anodized aluminum palette. The cord is plugged into a single coil, and you see how she has the little encaustic cakes on her table. She's able to adjust the intensity of the colors as she's working. You do not need to melt the whole cake when you start. I'm going to repeat that. You do not need to melt the whole cake when you start. I made this wonderful little diagram for my students. Essentially, I say to get your tin going, your tin is in contact with the heating element, with the anodized aluminum palette. Your cake, which of course you take out of the shrink wrap, you melt that. You melt it, I would say, about 1/8 of an inch of encaustic paint. You melt about 1/8 of an inch down. So once it gets down, about there, I pour in about 1/2 of an inch to the tin of encaustic medium. So that gives me my base dilution. And then I can adjust it on the palette as needed. So that's a way that you can really save your paint tube and adjust as you paint. because, this isn't going to be sufficient for every single painting that you do. You're going to want to, be able to paint with it and not be limited. And again, I feel like that's sort of a limiting belief when you jump into encaustic. You feel like you have to melt down the whole cake because Lord knows the little tins that come with them are the size of the cake. Very misleading.
So when you have those tins with colors in them, those can be reheated and reused as colors, right?
Oh, heck yes. I haven't even gotten to how easy it is to clean up. You literally unplug everything and it cools. There's a little bit more to clean up, but I would joke with my students that
Can Zoom see you and your screen?
Can we do?
I don't know if you can put it.
We might be able to.
We
Thank
might
you,
be able
Linda.
to-
That's fine. What we're seeing is we're seeing Jaya, which is great. I just didn't know if you wanted us to see what she was showing. Yeah,
Oh, I didn't show. Oh, thank you for saying something.
Sorry.
I didn't share the screen. I'm sorry, Zoom people. Here, help me out with a little bit of Zoom loving right there.
Thank you, Linda.
Oh, sorry about that. Yeah, share screen. Oh, the cleanup. So I would joke with my students that is, let's say that you're working in the encaustic studio, you're creating away, and you get text that your granddaughter is officially going into labor, and you got to run to the hospital right now. Unplug, not turn off, but unplug everything. That way, when you're out the door, you can do visual check of your plugs, head out. I found you want to unplug, I'm speaking from personal experience, because if you turn off, did you actually turn it off or did you turn it on? Wow. I did that once. I did actually turn it off, but I did have to call the store manager after the store was closed and he's having dinner and say, hey, can you go back and check something? So I did actually turn it off, but yeah, you never want to have it. Did I turn it off or did I turn it on? But you can get that visual check by just checking the plugs.
Or was it? No, what do you want?
Oh, okay. Are we sure?
No, this is up on the Zoom land, so.
Okay.
This was the last one.
Thank you.
showed.
Oh, cool. Thank you. Sweet.
Okay.
Okay, cool. Let me get this guy
Yeah,
right
there you go.
here.
See, now you'll be
Oh, now
up in the
I'm there.
corner.
Are they able to see all of the everythings now?
I think so.
We can see the screen share and we can see you when you're talking. Thank you.
Okay, cool. And then okay, so we'll just do it like this. Awesome. So I mentioned that encaustic and heat go hand in hand. When you work with the encaustic and you're creating layers with your liquefied wax, you need to fuse the layers together, because otherwise you essentially have a somewhat cooled surface of wax. You have another, and we can see these guys right here, yes. Another layer of wax that you've laid down. When you do not fuse them, that wax is going to have a tendency to slightly contract, and it can release ever so slightly from that layer that was painted on. So when you fuse it, the layers fuse together.
What do you mean fuse it? What is?
Oh, let me show you. Oh, let me show you. So to fuse the wax, you need to use another heating element, either a heat gun or a torch. You'll see people using butane torches and propane torches. I am a fan of the butane torch. This is a little bit shaky, but here I'm fusing my preliminary layer of wax using a heat gun. Here, we're in a workshop working large scale, and we're fusing using my favorite tool, the butane torch. No problem, I just want to make sure. Okay, with it. The butane torch is your paintbrush. It is your fire paintbrush, because you can adjust the flame to do different effects with your surface. You might want to do a broad fuse where you have a little bit of a stronger flame and you really get that wax going. Or you just need to do a spot fuse where you just use like a petal on a flower, or God forbid an eyelash, or anything that requires an extreme level of detail. You can dial that flame down and really hone in. The heat gun doesn't have that level of intricacy. And that can be something that a lot of people just don't know, that it's not them that has the loss of control, but they might be using a tool that is not giving them what they're looking for. So that's just the experience from understanding the
Is
heat.
that why you would get those, like when you take the brush, you would get kind of bumpy? If it's, you know, like this is very smooth and some of it's smooth, but then like it's kind of bumpy or.
So the heat, understanding how to control the heat is going to give you different surface texture. So if you want it to be smooth, you work it to be smooth. If you want it to have texture, you don't overheat it. So understanding that, what that surface of the wax looks like until it starts to really mellow out, you need to pull that heat away before it starts to flatten out. And that comes with practice, practice, practice. The soapbox that I get on the most with class is encaustic is all about control. And if you are out of control with your heat, you know exactly what that looks like. And I think that you've seen what melted crayons look like. It looks like that. It looks like a lot of melted crayons, and you see this stuff on Instagram. That's called out of control. And I'm making a big statement there, but I feel like after teaching this medium for a number of years, having shows, I can say with clear conviction that you can see when something is out of control.
Jaya, is that butane instrument
Torch.
torch? Is it like what a chef would use, or you have to have a specific part?
It is the torch that you could see in kitchens. I like to use the Iwatani torch head. You just have to make sure that you buy the right butane canister that's going to fit the right torch head. But yeah, I love the Iwatani torch head. You save everything. With encaustic process, there's a lot of scraping, incisions, using clay tools. There's a lot of removal of wax, and you save everything because this, once you melt it down, is going to be a whole new color. My biggest pet peeve is when I see people have, the encaustic palette turns into a hot mess over time, literally. There's a constant thing swirling all over. When they wipe it away with a paper towel, I cringe. Because first off, that's dollar bills. And then secondly, do you have any idea how many bees it took to make this? And do you have any idea how many bees are dying every day? So you squeegee that wax off, and you could squeegee it into a container, or you could squeegee it onto wax paper and let it cool, and you save it and you melt it. This is the ultimate recycling medium. I love this stuff. I have, at the end of workshops, I have bags of this stuff, and it's so much fun to OCD, pick the colors apart, and so that when you do melt them down, you have something that's kind of a greenish gray, something that's kind of a purple gray, instead of all just gray. I've had students request to stay after class to pick apart and put the wax in their respective color fields. It's really, really fun. Another aspect of encaustic that I feel that a lot of people don't realize is you need to be working on a level playing field, because you're essentially working with a medium that liquefies, and liquid is going to find the lowest point of gravity. And your painting will let you know really quick if something is a little bit out of whack. So part of my encaustic toolkit for my students is always a level and shims, so that they can get working area, not necessarily the table, because the table is going to move and it might not be in the same area each day, but that their working area is always level. And so this is always their number one before they even start fusing. So this fun guy, this is an example of a whole bunch of different techniques that you can do with encaustic. It's illustrating using a stencil. It's illustrating using collage. The green in this piece is embedded collage paper. It's illustrating using an incision tool to draw and create marks, and then filling that line with, and I heard that you meant, there's going to be a demonstrator using alcohol ink. I use alcohol inks as a rub over these incisions. It's also demonstrating an image transfer. Let me give you a little caveat with alcohol inks and encaustic. Too much alcohol ink or too much alcohol is going to break down the surface integrity of the wax. And the more you add, the gummier it will feel. So alcohol inks are not my recommendation if you're wanting to create a fine art piece, because alcohol inks are fugitive, they're dye-based, they will fade over time, they're not pigment-based. So they're fun, but if you want something that's going to last, you want to use pigment. And that would be either using straight encaustic paint or using like an India ink. However, alcohol inks are hecka fun and they're super fun with encaustic, but more on, I would say, a crafty level.
But not a powder pigment, like you would do icons with, like a powder pigment.
Let me, hold on, let me just catch my breath a little bit. I'm sorry, that was being super, super dramatic. Let me talk about that. Working with raw pigments is, in my opinion, the most unsafe practice you can do as an artist, and let me explain why. Raw pigments, when inhaled, are hyper dangerous, especially if you're using cobalts, cadmiums. It's not good to have if you do not have proper working environment for powdered pigments. If you see paint makers, if you look up RNF, if you look up Golden, and you see how they make their paints, they are in an astronaut suit, in a clean room that has zero air movement. When I see people using raw pigments, I'm curious as to what their studio setup is. And I know that there are some pastel artists, I would imagine there are pastel artists in here as well, but that's a thing. The raw pigments can be a very dangerous tool if you do not know what you're doing. So if you want to make your own encaustic paint, or you want to make your own paints and you want to use raw pigments, educate yourself before opening that can. Does that make sense? I kind of got on a little tangent, but thank you for bringing it up.
No, I never used it with that, but I used it for egg tempera.
Yeah, just
So
know what you're doing. Is all I got to say. Like those little particles.
Okay.
Yeah. Oh, when I see pastel artists, they do their thing, and then when they blow off the extra pastel. To blow, you actually have to inhale before you exhale. So you do the pastel. Oh my God.
Okay.
Oh. Oh my God. Please know that. Here's an example of one of the really cool visual textures you can get with encaustic, and this all has to do with how you control the heat so that you let the pigment sink within layers, and that's what gives you this beautiful cellular effect. This little guy right here, I've heard, I don't like encaustic because you can't get detail. You can't paint an eyeball in encaustic. Like, well, you can't. But but that's just, you just don't know how to have control with that medium. This right here was done with incision. The layer of wax was heated up to a point where you're able to scrape into it with almost like a dental tool. That was a metal clay tool. the wax was laid over that incision and scraped away with the clay tool. So that's what gives you this really nice clean line. Image transfer is super popular with encaustic, and here's a couple of examples of image transfer as well as using a stencil. And without getting into, I don't want to get too in depth with every process, but just want to show you what you can achieve with image transfer. And I am a sucker for texture. I love texture. Anything that like makes me want to like just touch it, you know, I'm going to get in there. And this is a process called accretion, where you're essentially building up those micro bumps. Let me see, Maureen mentioned, when you mentioned that instead of that super smooth surface, having something that has a little bit of texture, this is that to the extreme, where you do have a brush stroke, but when you keep brushing over it, brushing over it, brushing over it with more and more.
Why it happens.
That's why it happens. That's why it happens. And it comes with controlling the temperature, still fusing, and controlling that temperature between fuses. Here's another example of accretion. This one was a lot of fun. This one was a lot of fun. I instigated this piece by creating an incision with a metal tool. So that created like a little micro bump, if you will. And then it's sort of like the Princess and the Pea effect. It just, you just keep going with those textures. Here's one of my pieces. This I want to say is about 30 inches by 30 inches. And this utilizes a few of those techniques. And so I wanted to kind of show you, now that you have sort of like the appetizer platter of what's possible with some of these techniques, I'd like to show you some of my work and the direction that I like to go. And then in conclusion, I'm going to have you guys come up and see some of these in person, and please feel free to handle them. This piece was done with basically exploring accretion as well as different incision work, and I used gold encaustic paint within that incision. And because this is going to be mainly this presentation, how can I make this the full screen for the folks? Sure, bear with me just a second. No problem. Where's that? No problem. I actually have to think about it. I picked up a book. Really good question. It was Patricia's book, Patricia's Sega book. And it was just so sexy. The medium, like what you could do with it. It literally was like the United Nations of mediums. You could throw everything at it. And so I just started to experiment. I started gathering my own sort of like, you know, garage sale encaustic studio, where it started with, you know, a pancake griddle. And I explored different tins to use. And of course, it's like you see what you're supposed to use. And you're like, oh, I'm gonna make this myself. Or oh my gosh, I have this cupcake tin that I'm not using. I'm gonna use that. And then you learn, oh, I understand now why you want to have them separated instead of all in one tin. So what do? You go and you buy a jigsaw with a metal cutting tool. So you cut the cupcake tin. So you know, I'm just going to go out and get some really cheap individual tins. So you learn as you go. But yeah, I picked up a book and it just expanded from there. I was using pigments to make my own paint. And then I got told what's up. And I absolutely endorse, you know, get the professionally made paint, because I have tried using pigments to make my own paint. I have found that there is an inconsistency because I don't know how to make paint, and I'm wasting my time and endangering myself doing it. the colors of, okay, so sweet, so we have this. The colors are all different prices, just like how you see different prices for artist grade paints, and it goes a long way. People think that granted the initial investment in encaustic can be up there just because of equipment, but the paint is essentially the same if you're buying an artist grade oil paint. Oh, here we are. Oh, I see. Oh, we're like one of these guys. We're one of, oh, I did this, okay, and got it, excellent. So here's another one of mine. This is called Live Wire, and I want to say is 24 by 48 inches. I'm a sucker for turquoise. I absolutely love turquoise. This piece I used also the incision to create the wire, and then just controlling the movement of the wax with heat. This one was a fun one. Here's a close-up of one of my encaustic monoprints. This was done on, I want to say, a rice paper that was about 22 by 26 inches. And it incorporates not just encaustic, but also different Sumi inks and India inks. So this kind of shows how you can start to explore other substrates like paper for your encaustic. This is another encaustic monoprint, and I used a gold Sumi ink with this one. This is actually a metallic gold that peeks through. Here's my friend Vinay and I actually doing a monoprint process using a stencil. So if you're into any kind of monoprinting, encaustic is a lot of fun. This, I don't know if you can see, but this right here is a handmade encaustic book using various monoprinting techniques at a workshop that I did in, oh my gosh, yeah, that's where it was, I don't remember what it was. But we created these books that had incorporated all the techniques we learned in the process, and that was just a lot of fun. It was, you know, the studio, it just gets, it's like an explosion of craft. Like you've seen like sewing studios. The encaustic studio is just like that. This is an explosion of materials. There. Oh, that's fine. The screen sharing is kind of cutting off his head. This piece is 48 by 48, so 4 feet by 4 feet. It's of my previous horse, Logan. And so I like to show that you can get a little bit more realistic with encaustic. And my own personal style, I mean,
I was trying to move it.
oh, no problem.
But
Well, that's okay. No, I can get back to it.
Okay.
You know, it's not like I'm packing up my toys and leaving. But I like to show that you know, I'm a huge fan of semi-abstract art, where it kind of meets in the middle of that spectrum of realistic as well as full-blown abstract. And this, can we like get rid of the top part?
Yeah, let me see if I can.
Yeah. Like
I can put it down at the bottom, maybe. Yeah, I can put it
Maybe.
down below.
okay.
I don't know if I can hide
I
it.
can't hide it.
Hide.
Ooh, what's that gonna do?
Oh, that's
that's
gonna
okay.
hide all
That's
of us. Okay, that hides you too.
Okay, well, that's fine. Hide floating meeting toolbar, note to
Okay.
self. Okay, cool. So yeah, now you can see the top of Logan's head and his little ears.
But now we can't see you.
No, that's
because you're
okay.
just-
That's okay. This is, we'll get back to me in a second. Here we go. Good. Oh, God. And yes, now we're in full screen. And watch me do this. There we go. Now it's a presentation. So this piece again is 4 feet by 4 feet. This is called Seahorse. And I used my other, but not anymore, horse, Rommel, as subject matter for this. And so you can see how it does explore some of the extreme movement that you can get with the wax, as well as a level of detail and texture in this process.
How long have you been doing this?
Yes, a long time. Let me answer that later when I can do the calculation in my head. Long enough for me to not know the answer off the top of my head. This is 24 by 72, so 2 feet by 6 feet, 2 feet by 6 feet. And this was inspired by my drive to and from Sacramento on the Delta. So the egrets, this guy is probably about 1.5 feet tall, just to give you a gauge of that. And again, my love of the monochromatic and black and white, show off in these. This is 48 by 60, so 4 feet by 5 feet. And I put this up here just so you can kind of see the level of detail that you can get, and really get some fun expressive qualities with the wax. This is Fallon. And here's a picture of me working that large. So your panels go up, your brushes go up. You're using not just the small tins of wax, but you're using that Presto skillet to hold your color. So you can really get that loaded up and then apply on a much larger scale. So everything increases when your panel size increases. This is some of my more recent work. This one is 184 by 24. And you can see that it's starting to get a little bit more colorful. I'm a huge fan of black and white. And on the polar opposite, I absolutely love color. The visual texture that you see right here has to do with almost an accretion style buildup, where there's sort of a striation that you achieve from the scraping process. So that's what you're seeing right here. And the control of the torch helps these lines stay in place. Also from that same series, this is another architectural piece. And I'm using layering as well as incisions into the wax, layering color over those incisions, and then scraping back very carefully any excess wax just to reveal that pinstripe. All of this level of precision has to do with control of the heat of your surface, control of the heat of your wax, and control of the heat of your torch or heat gun if you go for it. So this just has to do with really understanding your temperatures. Here's another recent couple of pieces that I did for a show that I almost forgot that I had to do pieces for. This piece is, oh my gosh, 36 by 72, 3 feet by 6 feet, called Delta Current. And this one was so much fun to do. This one was so much fun because when you work big and when you're painting with wax, usually you need your piece to be flat. You can work it vertical, but usually you work it flat. So it was a very physical process painting this piece. I had 2 low benches that I would prop it up on. I would have a table that I would move it to. So there was a lot of this to this to this to this to this. And, but that's just, the way that I roll. So to give you an idea of scale, just so you can kind of see how big it is. Thank you. This was, I would say, one of the most fun pieces that I've ever done. And I absolutely, I mean, I go big. I love big stuff. I know that I'm giving you guys a lecture on encaustics today, but I'm kind of moved into murals now. So things have they just keep getting bigger. I'm like when's the next building? What kind of articulating boom lift do I need now? But I always love going big, and that's just, how I work. But that doesn't necessarily mean that that's, the direction that you need. Not everyone can go that direction, especially with encaustic. But having those resources to be able to go a little bit bigger, resources being that studio space, that helps. You can get big. When there's a will, there's a way. A kitchen table can go a long way. But yeah, this is where I like to go with my encaustics. And I think yeah, that's it. So let's go back to this guy, and then let's find Zoom. Hi, everyone. Oh, can you help me find everyone? Find everyone again. Make sure I'm doing okay. That was perfect timing. So what I would love to do, I wanted to just kind of, you guys are a little bit closer now. I wanted to pass a few of these guys around. Feel free, it's okay. You can touch these. This is an example of the accretion of that buildup, and I used a tissue paper as sort of a armature. Yes, and the tissue paper can burn, which is why you want to know what you're doing. So being able to, once essentially that tissue paper gets impregnated with wax, you have a little bit more leeway with playing with it. So I'm going to pass some of these guys around.
That was what I was going to ask you to explain that you did.
Once the paper, there's a weaving that you guys can do. Once paper or whatever the material, string, any natural materials, once it has, I like to describe it as being impregnated with wax, it still can, of course, catch fire with either a heat gun or your torch, but you have a few more seconds of wiggle room. And sometimes it's just those few seconds that you need to be able to manipulate that material.
You want to show the Zoom people.
Thank you. Yes. Oh, thank you, Zoom people, for reminding me.
Okay.
Yeah.
Hang on, I need to-
Stop
okay.
video. There we go.
Change the camera.
Thank you. Thank you, Zoom people. Thank you for your patience with me. Here we go. Here's the accretion. So you can see that there's a lot of texture there. Lovely.
What's cold wax? Sounds totally different.
Cold wax is a different animal. Cold wax, now it's back. How about that?
Zoom in and then back.
We'll do it like this. And cold wax is beeswax and solvent. Solvent is the big red flag with encaustic.
Okay.
Yes, you can use oil paint with encaustic, but when it comes to using any kind of turf or Gansol or solvent, that's where the fume
Yeah, that's what I would.
becomes not
I didn't
safe.
even know that's what it was. I just don't.
Yeah. Cold wax is beeswax and usually like a turf, like I don't think it's a linseed oil, but you absolutely do not want to put that solvent in your encaustic, because once that is heated, that's a yucky fume that you don't want in your studio. I'm going to show you guys. This right here is an image transfer of a heart. This is showing an image transfer where we laid down a layer of wax, basically smooshed around into melted crayon status, but the image transfer now has a really cool color field to lay over.
Do you find you have a group of returning collectors?
Yeah, my customers, yes, I have folks that collect my work. I will be doing open studios this year, by the way. So I'll make sure to let Rockland Fine Arts know, to let everyone know. And open studios will predominantly be my acrylic work, which I am not demonstrating today. However, because you saw how cool my encaustic work is, you absolutely want to come see my acrylic work.
Yes.
Right? Oh my gosh, I want to say we two. No, I forget. Here is another kind of multiple we're good. Okay, nice. With my favorite subject matter in the history of anything, because chickens are my favorite animal. This little sample, chickens, right? Yeah, chickens are the best ever. I would just, you come and help me. This piece is using pigment sticks, which are different from oil sticks. Pigment sticks have a very, very slight amount of linseed oil in them, and are absolute BFFs with encaustic. Best friends forever for anyone who didn't catch that. But pigment sticks are a lot of fun for using to create glazes to work with color with encaustic. And the subtleties of using soft translucent layers, this is usually not really what you see when you're scrolling through the Instagram with encaustic. It's usually like loudspeaker, full blown, melt it as much as it can possibly be melted, and then throw some leaves on it or something. If that's what it takes to get you going, cool. But where's the next step is usually where I come from. This little sample piece, this is again like one of my favorite little examples of really showing. Oh, thank you. I am so sorry, Zoom people. You guys, thank you. Here, thank you for your patience.
We love you, Jaya.
Thank you. So this guy right here kind of shows how you can use multiple layers and scrape back. The drips are a really fun visual texture, and by applying multiple layers of that wax and scraping back, you're sort of embedding those drips, those little mini circles, into sub layers, and therefore kind of controlling that outcome. And this is an image transfer just over a really basic background. Image transfers are like the easiest, peasiest way to get imagery on your painting. Who has done acrylic gel image transfers successfully? Not me. And I teach acrylic. Image transfers with encaustic, it's like a breath of fresh air. First off, your images need to be, oh my gosh, pigment based or toner based. If they're inkjet based, it's just going to wipe away with the water removal process. So you need to make sure that you're printing it on the correct machine. Inkjet prints, no matter how much you pray to the image transfer gods, you're not going to get it.
And that's what this chicken and the bird part,
they're image transfers. Yes, those are not my super mad drawing skills. Those are image transfers. And this is one of my first ones that shows a lot of sort of like a distressing texture. Here I did use alcohol inks and some collage paper and incision. So this has multiple processes. As I continued to develop my encaustic curriculum when I was teaching, it ultimately got to the point where my students just kept asking, what else? And at one, I started to explore portraits in other mediums, and then I started to explore it in encaustic. For instance, the piece of Fallon that you saw, where she was distorted by that big black brush stroke, and she had her awesome tattoo across her chest. I said, well, I'm going to do a portrait encaustic class. And so this is 100% encaustic, which is showing control of the torch and control of the temperature of the wax that you're using, how you can maintain brush strokes and have a fairly flat surface. It's okay. I didn't forget here. I didn't forget you guys. Here, you kind of see like a funny, here's her dreads. There. As I pass this one around, I want you to see the varying levels of opacity and translucency And this has to do with actually using the palette as a palette, and you're adjusting how much medium, how much pigment. And so, yeah, feel free to take a look at this one and really see how there are areas that really glow, and there are also areas that are a little bit more of like a flat color because it's so strong, or it's so much more of an intense color.
How long did it take you to do a piece like that?
That one was about 3 hours. And the portrait workshop was a 3-day workshop. And that's how I would gauge how long a workshop would be. If I could do it in 1 hour, it'd be a 1-day workshop. 2 hours, 2 days, 3 hours, 3 days. Because you need to be able to establish that element of control before jumping, oh my gosh, jumping into the actual face. So we do some exercises and practice that. I just gave you guys a lot of info. We can go back to me now. So, oh no, watch me do this all by myself.
You have one more picture up there.
Do I? This one? Oh, no.
Behind you. Yes.
Oh, this one. Oh, here, let's do a little,
Okay, here.
like a, yeah, you got this. All right, good.
Well, so the-
I brought, this was one of my more recent landscapes that I did. And so you'll notice that my piece has kind of moved away from being hyper flat. That's sort of like the holy grail. Having an encaustic piece that is glass flat, as smooth and crystal clear as possible. And I tell you, if you can just break away from that and embrace the pits and embrace the brush strokes, the world is going to open up for you. So this piece has a receding sunset. I used okay brushes, angled bristle brushes, and just to create that effect. So this guy, I want to say, is about 1824 and is another one of my favorite subject matters of skies. And
There's your sunset, Linda.
oh my God. Oh, it looks so awful on screen. Oh my gosh, I promise. It's like a billion times better
It's-
in person.
It's better on their screen.
Is it
probably.
better
That's-
on their screen?
Yeah, the
Oh.
TV's making everything look green.
So, yeah, so sunset being one of my favorite subject matters. And what I would love to do is if you guys have any more questions, I'd love to answer some questions and then, give you guys my official thank you for having me speech. So any questions before we start to wrap it up?
You're not teaching any more classes.
I know. I'm not. No, I got some other stuff that I got going on. But yeah, not to say that it's not going to happen in the future. But as of right now, I've got a different jam.
Okay.
Big wall jams. And another encaustic question.
If I may say, if she does start teaching more classes, we need to know about it because Karen Stegman and I took a class with her and I think we wrecked her. I think that's when she stopped teaching classes, right, Jaya? But it's great. She even made her mother come and take the class with us and we had a blast. So you guys, if she starts teaching again, I highly recommend it.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. When my capacity expands to creating a new studio space that will accommodate classroom, I will absolutely make sure that everyone knows and the floodgates will open.
So you said the oil paint back.
You can use oil paint with encaustic.
I mean, I read it and I was like, oh,
Yeah.
that sounds dangerous.
If you're just jumping in, I wouldn't recommend it. Just stick with the natural, stick with the wax. But yes, you can use oil paints with encaustic. However, it does release a different fume because of the linseed oil. And you absolutely do not want to use any solvents with the encaustic, and that's like turpentine, Gamsol. That's all sorts of not good. Like,
So when because I bought it online, and so made it with the Damar and all that stuff, but is the Damar in those little things too? It's in everything, right? So
Absolutely,
you don't
yes.
have to worry, you don't have to mix anything, because I got
Yes.
these panels of beeswax someone gave me.
Mhm.
I don't know what to do with them yet.
Essentially to make encaustic medium, when I made my medium, I would do what I would call a medium day.
Okay, yeah,
It's a day, you, because you're not just gonna.
and you
make
have to know what you're doing.
And it's a good idea to know what you're doing. But essentially, you're melting down at the correct temperature. The resin takes a while because it's crystallized.
Yeah. I had that from Icon Paint too,
It's like a little bit of resin.
but I never really used it.
Yeah, so the Damar resin, which is part of Damar varnish, the Damar resin mixed with beeswax, and usually it comes in a pelleted form. Oh. This is comedy, I love it. Here, my little beeswax pellets. Plus resin equals encaustic medium. And you really just want to make sure that you're working at safe working temperatures. The lower, the better. The lower, the slower. So those with the ADHD, tame yourselves. But the lower the temperature you work, the safer it is, and the less your wax is going to yellow. If you are super impatient, like some people, and you ramp it up, you're going to have a yellow, yucky medium, and all of your paint is going to have that yellow cast. So the really being able to find something else to do while that's melting is a good idea. You do also, if you're making your own medium, it does need to be strained because there's, is that how you pronounce it? Detritus? Little bits of stuff, like little bits of bark, whatever is in the Damar resin, it'll settle to the base of your encaustic medium that you're making. So you need to filter it out. And I usually filter it through a t-shirt into a little cake pan. So that time spent, let me give you a time dollar equation. That time spent making it to whatever perfection level it's going to be, it's worth it to buy it, especially if you're starting out. You start making it when you get really excited about when you're like, I'm ready to jump into encaustic, then jump into that element. But don't start there because that's just going to be an element of frustration I have found. Another question. Where's the source to buy some? I have no idea what University Arts encaustic section looks like now. I know what it looked like pre-pandemic and then pre-supply chain issues. But they did have a good encaustic selection when I was looking for encaustic. So I would check out University Art in Sacramento. Absolutely.
Well, you guys, are you still lecturing from Los Rios? Were you teaching at Sac City College?
No, but thank you for thinking of us. All right, well, you guys, thank you so much for having me. I hope that you learned a lot, even though I didn't have it.
Learn more than I did at my course at the college for when I took that.
And I didn't even do an actual for realsies demo. So I'm really glad that that you gained some value for that. And if anything, you have a little bit of a better idea about the medium, and if you want to jump into it, take it on, and how you would be able to do that. So I just want to say thank you guys for having me, and I'm sure that we'll be seeing each other again in the future. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jaya.
Thank you.
Now we can appreciate all of